So welcome to the Node API team meeting for July 29th, 2022. We'll follow the approach of looking at the issues we have tagged for milestone 11. Before we get started, does anybody have any announcements they'd like to share? If not, okay, let's launch into what we've got labeled there. Milestone 11. I'm going to share. Okay, so here's our list. First one, drive towards full coverage. I don't know if anybody has any updates or things we should discuss on that front today.
Sorry, yeah, I'm just I'm just like going through the list, the list of issues I made, and probably like some of them already covered, so I'm just slowly kind of checked off them. But yeah.
Sounds good. Yeah, I guess maybe close some if they're covered. Otherwise, we can highlight the ones that need work.
Yep.
Sounds good. Okay, the next one is stale issues. So just going to the bottom. So Nick, I see you tagged this one.
Yeah.
I guess this one we kind of asked if the original poster was able to submit a PR. I don't think we got a PR, did we?
No, no. Oh, maybe a draft.
Oh, maybe we do. So right, okay. So let's take a look at that. And
I need the rebase.
right. So I think the challenge is, though, when we looked at it, it was a breaking change. So maybe we can talk about that. Is that an issue? Is that? I guess, is it breaking? If it's truly breaking, I'm not sure we would want to do it. But if it's something where nobody's going to have the code because, you know, it's broken at runtime, maybe that's not going to break anybody. I don't know what people think on that front.
So should we kind of, I've seen like in other kind of parts of our Node API, C++ Node API, we use different macros to enable some features and stuff.
Right.
Should this also be considered as a new feature and be under such define or something?
Right. So we could basically opt into, right.
So yeah, I'm just curious also look on this change. Yeah, I've seen he's removing some constants for some methods. I think we discussed many times before with const stuff, and now they're being removed in this PR. Is it the overall issues because we have we define some array type which is not a legal one, and we have some.
Right. I'm just looking at.
I just wonder if there's a cheaper way to make this fix. Just warning.
Yeah.
I've seen such similar warnings in some cases. Like, for example, you have some unsigned integer, and we're trying to convert -1, and many compilers giving a warning because that's, it thinks like you have some signed integer and it will convert to something unsigned. But maybe there is a better way to kind of to do this conversion without causing this warning.
Right. Let's just see. I'm just trying to remember, where would that be defined? Is that a node? Like, is that in core?
It should be in core, I guess.
Yeah,
Okay.
in core.
Okay. So if we go just node, and we look in, it's source.
I think that it's just native types.
Okay. Yeah, I had two guesses. One of those two, and okay, there we go. Okay. What was again? It was
Like an unknown array type, or like
no, but I think it was like array type. Right. So we have this array type.
Okay.
And we're
where with some
like really we should add a new entry here, shouldn't we? If we look here.
Oh, I see what we do here. What we convert something like -1, but it's not legal Napier array type. So we're introducing variable which is not in declared scope.
I'm trying to think of why. Like, I guess so. Do we use it anywhere else? Okay, so this is the only place where it's used. So
should we just instead of introducing new type, just use one of this like unsigned integer 8 or just int 8 array?
I guess the thing is, like, this is a public thing. Although this is protected, so this can't be used anywhere else, right? Yeah, except that we're basically returning, I guess, -1. We're creating a whole nother type.
Okay.
Huh. And then if we
Okay.
So if we return this unknown type, what do we do then? It's like, is it causing error somewhere? Or how it's being used? Hmm. I guess maybe this what PR does. Like, what if we're facing some kind of a unknown type? So should we just simply throw exception, like a compile time error? Because especially if we do with constant expression stuff.
Type is known. I just wonder, should we add like an unknown type to that enum?
Is it a valid options in terms of standard JavaScript standard? So this is my doubt.
Right.
So I think that we did this because we want to node API fulfill the JavaScript standard, the ECMAScript standard. And then we use the unknown type in the wrapper here.
Yeah, I would prefer to kind of look at this a little bit deeper, but I agree that it sounds like we should avoid using this unknown type altogether. If we can't determine type, we should just simply throw error at the very beginning.
Right, because is there any case where there should be an unknown type? Can we create arbitrary typed arrays?
I guess in case if it's unknown, it will be probably kind of byte array. So it's the best what we can do from the JavaScript point of view. I don't think we support any unknown types. We do need to know like what size of elements.
Right, so, okay, so sorry, I'm just looking at where's the code that did that unknown? Trying to see.
Previously, this unknown type was used only single location, and I guess someone implemented this context express function to determine type of variable using C primitive type. Right. And after that, we somehow used it in some locations, but probably had no real meaning because it would fail down the road. Because if it's unknown type, probably passed inside of our core Node API functionality, it will fail at some point.
Right, and this.
And this PR addresses it differently. It still keeps the concept of unknown type, but rather than kind of making it part of this enum, they introducing kind of Boolean variable, and now like this concept of unknown type propagate all over the place. I think in reality we should just kill it altogether and not allow
Right,
it.
and this, like, what gets returned by this?
Right.
Is, yeah.
It will be some unknown value, some random thingies.
Because, yeah, I think unless there's a case where we could actually do the right thing, we don't know what the type is. Then, yeah, just getting rid of the concept and having it fail earlier or something makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, this context expression function, which responsible for determining this type, it should just, instead of returning this random unknown -1 value and kind of screwing up the rest of your code somewhere down the road, maybe we can just simply throw right away that we don't know what it is. This function just fails.
If you can keep chatting, I'll just be back in 1 sec.
So what do you guys think? Like, I would propose to fail immediately if we don't know what the type is.
Yes, Sanjay. You have two choice, or fail immediately, or try to give some default value, default type. So if you if it's unknown type, it's for example a string in int 8 or int 8, I don't know. So
yeah.
But in this case, I think that it's a failure have unknown type. So
it sounds like still trending towards the, it's just, you know, like we shouldn't have the concept of a unknown type fail earlier, or.
Well, like just Nicholas said, like return like int 8 or something by default, which is like what I think like a normal like buffer array using byte array using just some kind of byte size variable. we have very first constructor, like you see, it's if typed array constructor didn't receive type, we currently using this unknown type array, but probably instead we should just simply use byte, kind of single byte array. Yeah, it's over here. Is
Sorry, which line?
if you look on this line 2008.
Okay.
See, previously we just if this default constructor received no parameters, we just
Right. Okay. Right.
But what we can do, we can just simply say, oh, by default it will be kind of byte array.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay, and that was probably the only way you could get it to be an unknown type, or? Yeah, like, I mean, that the call we make to Node API can never return us a unknown type, right? Because the enum doesn't include that.
Right. I think the JavaScript standard does not allow you to have a known type. It only has some predefined type. And if in this C++ API we want to assume some defaults, a reasonable default will be single byte array. I just not sure which one the correct choice here, unsigned or signed.
Right, and for anybody who would have used that default constructor, will this change anything for them? If we go to we choose whichever one makes the most sense.
That's a good question.
I guess this unknown array type was already like that must be an external unknown. Right. No, I think that's private though, right?
It's protected.
Yeah.
So nobody's supposed to see it outside, but whoever inherits from this type could see it.
Right. So we could just define that as one of the other types.
Yeah, if we can just simply say this unknown array type is really like, say,
right,
unsigned int 8.
And deprecate, I mean, probably say don't use this, right? Like
nobody's supposed to use it directly. It's protected.
But as a subclass, you could.
Yes, because it's only protected.
Yeah. But that might, yeah, like
it's probably protected. Do we have like a typed array, like which is like a template? Maybe we have our own class which inherits from it.
Yeah, let me just open file itself. File. Okay, why am I? It seemed to. Why is my search not working? In the wrong file? Oh, it's because this removes it.
Okay. In node.js.
Yeah, okay.
In the
Yeah, you see like a typed array of is the one who inherits from it. But I doubt that we use it. So.
Right. So I was just thinking like technically a subclass could use that. But
I guess nobody really kind of inherits from it besides our code.
it's very unlikely.
Yeah.
We do have some logic if it's okay. What we should assume something here, right? We're saying if it's unknown. Oh, interesting.
Essentially, if it's unknown, we create an empty buffer, essentially.
Yeah, I think it's like it lets you create the wrapper without knowing the type of what you're wrapping necessarily. And then so this says, okay, I'm going to create it like this typed array. I give it the env, I give it the nappy value, but I don't tell it what the type is. And so it's unknown until, like in here, it's actually saying, well, I don't know, the wrapper doesn't know what it is. So when I do this typed array type, if it's unknown, I actually I make the C call. Otherwise, I don't bother with the C call.
But see on line 2027, we're saying like we expect it to be int A8. So even it's unknown, but if it's happened to be not int 8, we fail, right? We throw at this point. So what we're actually saying here, like if it's unknown array type, it must be int 8 type. This next line, yeah, this one.
Yeah, we're saying throw failed.
Yeah.
So well, where does it check? Like this part I'm not quite sure. No, throw if failed. Like, because it's this check that says, okay, status right. Okay, you're right. So we're saying if it's not an int 8, then yeah. But I think it's along the lines of if we don't know, we try and get info about it. Like here, we're saying like, what's the element length? We actually say get typed array info. And if it can't tell us, then we throw an error. Otherwise, we, use the length that it tells us.
Yeah, I guess the question like, do we support like unknown types altogether?
I guess there's like a basic set of types, but then the question is, can I make my own array types? And if so, they may have, we won't get one of those known types, but they could still be valid. I'd have to look at the spec. Let's see here, typed arrays, JavaScript, Java, oops. Like a big int 64 array. Whereas, no, I want to go back to here. So we've got those types.
I think like the only scenario which we may get with unknown type, imagine that we have some an API value which coming from say from non-C++ node API, and we at this point simply don't know what this type is.
Right.
So but I would assume in this case we have some kind of wrapper, right? Like we need to wrap up this type. And I'm not sure what in context of default constructor does not make sense, but with second constructor, we're saying this an API value, right? But nobody stops us at this point, just simply ask, just call this C function and find out what's this.
Right, I'm trying to think why we didn't just do that.
So currently, what it seems like we did it on demand. Like then we want to check type, and then we want to check length. At this point, we see if it's a known type, so we didn't get type explicitly. In this case, we try and calculate them.
Right. We must have thought for some reason there was a way we could get types other than one of those. But like the call to get typed.
I guess the reason was like why to call this function if we never say need these values.
Right, like we definitely, you know, we need it for things like these element sizes and stuff.
But what say if it's okay, typed array type. So in this case, we call this typed array type, and typed array type would actually calculate it.
Right. Like this will get us the length. The thing is this type, let's like nappy get typed array info.
Element length.
Oops, sorry. Get oops. Okay, what's the right? Okay, so right, and that's this nappy typed array type.
So
which is-
unknown was really kind of just an artifact of our C++ wrapper for the cases, and we don't know yet.
Right. Yeah, like I don't see any evidence that it makes sense. Like if this can only return one of our known types, right?
Yes. So in the end,
And
we
it's
always
almost,
use.
yeah, go ahead.
Go ahead. Sorry, I interrupted you.
Yeah, like it's got to be one of those types, so it's not really unknown at that point. I think if we could just in these cases where we don't where it's not passed in, we do the lookup immediately. Maybe that's the right the better answer.
It's one solution, and it sounds like what what submitted PR did. They introduce additional Boolean variable for this case. Yeah.
Right, which I can kind of understand, right? Like if you're like, hey, for some reason you did this, I'm just going to replicate the same thing in a way that doesn't have the warning. So I totally understand why they did that. But looking at this, it seems like, I don't know, maybe we'll find there was some reason why, like in these constructors, doing that lookup might have a problem.
But I agree with you. If we do it, we don't need to do it in first constructor because first constructor does not receive value. So technically, we just need to have some default, meaningless default, if you like.
Right. Yeah. That one we could just say, hey, you didn't tell us. I guess, although, is there a way to set the value afterwards?
I don't know. But if we set the value afterwards, we must recalculate all the stuff right away to avoid any issues. Because imagine if somebody already set type and we assign something, and we can't really postpone at this point.
Right. Yeah, although we could maybe like basically set it to unknown and then it'll be recalculated, but it seems like a good approach to try is like here. Yeah, just set a default here. Just look it up.
Sounds good to me.
The only thing is that may throw errors or exceptions somewhere. However, like I don't think from what we've looked at, there's any reason to believe that we'll ever get an unknown type. Like if we call back on the nappy value, if it's an actual nappy value, we will get something which is one of those types. I'm just like, and no existing code should be working properly or working at all and be affected by that change is where I'm going. Even though technically it would be breaking, potentially, like if there was some code that could be working properly, it might be broken, but I can't see that there should be any working code that could possibly be doing that unless other people can think of a way. Is there any underscore type?
Can we just write something on this decision and kind of get back to it and next.
Yeah. No, I think we've
letting us create a document. It would be nice if we spend some time looking at this document.
Yep. Yeah, good point. Okay, so let me go back to although the constructor with no options, have to look at that, like you can't really have a type with an without an M backing it. So I don't quite know how that works.
We meant default constructor here, right? Like in the default constructor, just simply use int8, for example.
But if there's no M, like if there's no actual object on the back end, like in Node.js in the C side for it, like just setting it to some value doesn't help, I guess, unless maybe later on in the new it will create one of that type. Maybe. Okay.
You could just mention like default type could be like whatever. It should be like first one comes in with enum.
Right.
I guess it's int8.
Yeah, if you're okay, if we think like maybe int8.
Yes, it's with 0 will be an API int8 array.
Yeah.
Okay, I'll type that there and we can, people have time to take a look. We could take a look at doing that. And so back to then.
I mean,
issues. Oh, right. Sorry, you're right. Yeah. I'm just going to quickly look. I think that was the newest one. Maybe I'd suggest, like, you know, as Vladimir was suggesting, unless somebody thinks otherwise, why don't we just flip over to the document and spend the rest of the time on that?
yeah.
So, Legendicast, you want to take us through that?
Yeah. Okay. Thank you. I
Stop sharing. You can
share my
share.
screen.
Yeah.
Great. So can we see my screen?
Yes.
Yeah.
Wonderful. So the problem here is that we have seen requests on the consolidation on the API core implementation about the problems that we have deviating the styles and convention from the other part of the Node.js core implementation. And we have lots of problems around the Node API implementation, especially around the finalizers, since we have been around that there have been a lot of crashes when the program is going to shut down. And we have come up with several solutions around the finalizers, but I believe it's not enough since we have identified multiple problems, like say, we have described in the document that the finalizer may have been unnecessarily postponed to, like say, it has been postponed for twice, like say first in a second pass callback and the second with a set immediate, which is unnecessary. So this document describes a solutions for it and about the possible shutdown cleanups and how to tackle it with a more cleaner solution. And I have described the problems about when we are shut down, if it's possible to, like say, promote the it's the problem about if a finalizer could code into JavaScript, and I believe Vladimir is working on solution on it, and I'm just describing the problem here and trying to find if we can coordinate Vladimir's work into Node.js core and to see if there is another solution to it. If the Vladimir solution can be more easily adopted, so users don't have to change their code if they're to explore if there is any possibility around, on the solution. So that's the finalizer part, and I have a part for the thread function. As you can see, the thread function have finalizers, but the implementation of thread function is not the same. It's deviating from the other finalizers in the Node API implementation. So we should fix that and try to generalize the finalizer abstraction. And there is a call out on the safety of the thread function finalization. I don't have a solution for this yet. I will continue to explore if we have a non-breaking solution for this problem, and if the solution cannot be done in a non-breaking way, and I will describe how we can do it with a new API shapes. And the environment shutdown, it's mainly about the problem, like say when the environment is shutting down, the callbacks and the Node API callbacks cannot call into JavaScript, and there is a ongoing discussion on it and on how we handle this and whether or not we can make the environment shutdown earlier so that we can allow Node add-ons to call into JavaScript in their callbacks. And also there is a section describing referencing primitive values, and I have dig into the other engines like JavaScript implementation on the API. And I believe Vladimir also have a work around this. So maybe Vladimir's feedback on this section will be very helpful, so we can see if we can land Vladimir's coordinate Vladimir's work into the Node core. And the notable thing is that in the implementation of JavaScript of Node API, we don't have weak reference around even with the JavaScript object. So since the weak reference with reference contingency is not very reasonable, as I can see. but they are implementing weak refs in JavaScript as it's a ECMAScript API, but they are not exposing it as a native API like C API. So for now, they are just not supporting weak reference with Node API. So that's a current status. Maybe I believe Vladimir's feedback on this section will be very helpful. And there is a open issue on the issue, like say a object with a title loop object is not garbage collected with node references. I need to continue to investigate on this problem and find out what we can do for this with a better experience. And callback scopes, that's about the async context tracing in the Node API. I believe we need more. I have to investigate more around this part until we can have a more detailed solution on this. So that's the
And I think that's the one that
document.
Anna was poking at, like one of the callback scope and context was the one that she was saying it would be good if we had better integration with how it's done in the rest of Node, right?
Yes, but I would like to say that Anna's request on the callback scope is that she wants the finalizers to be able to facilitate the async hooks mechanism. But the problem is that if we don't allow the finalizer to call into the JavaScript, then we don't have to create a callback scope for the finalizers, since when the finalizers are run, we have already lost the reference to the, let's say, async resource. So we cannot trigger async hooks callback for the finalizers. So that's the core problem about whether or not we can facilitate callback scope around the finalizers. So this section is about how can we improve the finalizers without callback scopes.
Right. Yeah. Okay. So it's related.
Yeah. So I hope people can take a look at this document, and I appreciate any feedbacks around the problem. And I believe I will begin with the work around the second pass callbacks, since I suppose this problem is less likely to be contentious.
Sounds good. And I think maybe we should
about optimization. So there are no new features. So that will be a good start for the work.
Probably also we should plan to put this doc on the agenda so that every week, if we've got time, we plan to spend some time looking into detail in one of the sections, or if somebody has looked at it can share. Yeah,
I will create a check-in issue for it so that we can discuss it on GitHub too and draw more attention in the core repository.
Sounds good.
I guess my question is, so document says like we're not doing exactly the same as the rest of node.js. I just trying to understand for myself what's node.js kind of what this requirement are, like what current node.js standard approach to finalizers supposed to be.
I don't believe we have a written document for this, but in Node core we don't allow calling, since they are primarily using the weak callbacks, so they are not calling into JavaScript, and they are not using the second pass callback, and so they don't have the problem around the second pass callbacks and the async resources since they don't call into JavaScript. So the main problem is that we Anna suggested is that we should use the callback scope when when implementing async callbacks every time when they are calling into JavaScript. So when talking about the async callbacks, that's how I'm not doing it currently.
So I think when she said standard approach, it's like the callback scope for going into JavaScript, not necessarily related to finalizers, but finalizers happen to be one of the places we do that. And that's the tricky place.
Yeah.
Then there may not be an equivalent to the regular.
Yeah, right.
I think it's because like
that sorry. So that's where I build the Radomir's work around the finalized types can improve the condition, since the new finalized type cannot call into JavaScript. The new finalizers are not allowed to call into JavaScript, so it gets rid of the callback scope and the async callbacks stuff around it.
Yeah, it would definitely kind of simplify some scenarios, but we still need to understand what to do with old one.
Yeah.
Or should we kill them altogether?
We have to illustrate the problem in a holistic way so that we can understand the overview of the node implementation and how we can improve it.
Right, like in terms of the callback scopes, like I think if I understand, you're saying one of the reasons we can't use them is because we don't have the objects that we would need, right?
Yeah, when the finalizers are being invoked, the object has already been it's already gone, so we don't have the object when we are invoking the finalizers.
Right. So I mean, I just wonder, like, there's sort of two parts of that. There's one, being able to use the shared code and the fact that it requires an ID. The other one is like the original ID, if it's gone, there's nothing really that can be tracing usefully. Like, are we breaking context? And the answer is, I don't think there's any useful way we're breaking context. So maybe like a dummy ID or something might let us share the code without actually breaking anything. Or
to my understanding, that the ID is used in async hooks API, but the more significant part is the JavaScript object relevant to the ID, as the JavaScript object is being used as the storage for the async local storage. So yeah, async local storage is a stable API. So I believe that's the more significant part we should consider rather than the async hooks callbacks.
Right. So, but like, is there a case where, like, the code that runs as part of the finalization actually needs to be part of the async context?
Yeah, that's the problem we need to explore, that if we should recovering the async execution resource for the finalizer callbacks.
Right. Or does it make sense to like document somewhere in async context? By the way, any code you run in finalizers won't be part of this.
Yeah, that's also a good alternative to the problem, I can document that.
Just, you know, like, I have to think about it more, but like my gut feeling is like stuff that's happening in finalization is after you've already gotten rid of everything else. Like you're basically just cleaning up. So that context may not, like, it may not be useful to try and tie it back to the original context, or it may not make sense or something. I could be totally wrong, but that's kind of my initial thought.
Yeah, I believe that's reasonable, and I believe a written document will be very helpful. So
yeah, definitely. Right. Yeah, like figuring it out and writing it down, you know. Yeah.
So people are warned about the lost of context when the finalizer is wrong.
Yeah. Okay, well, I do see we're like 5 minutes after, but I think this is a great doc, and let's make sure to sort of sync on it each week as well to see where people have looked and how we can progress the different things. Any other things we should touch on before we close out for this week? If not, thanks for everybody's time, and we will see you in GitHub and next time. Thanks. Bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.